Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestle News 365. Hope everyone is doing very, very well. There is a ton of news stories to get into in the pro wrestling world today, so let's get straight into the news stories, starting off with the Wednesday Night Wars. Of course, you have to start off with the Wednesday Night Wars, the ratings war between AEW Dynamite and NXT, specifically the AEW president Tony Khan revealing the AEW ratings victory this week over NXT. It happens most weeks. Of course, last week NXT won in total viewership, but in the key demographics, the 18 to 49s, pretty much every demographic apart from the 50 plus, AEW Dynamite once again defeated NXT, and it was pretty much the same this week. Of course, I think we're still waiting on the actual ratings to come out from Showbuzz Daily. I'm not sure if there's still a delay because of Thanksgiving. We'll have to double check, but AEW President and CEO Tony Khan has noted on Twitter that AEW drew 913,000 live viewers for their special Winter is Coming episode, topping the 658,000 viewers that WWE NXT drew for their TakeOver War Games Go Home show. Khan also said that AEW drew 543,000 viewers in the key 18 to 49 demographic, while NXT drew 210,000 in the same demo, so NXT was topped by Dynamite by 159%. Tony Khan wrote, "Thank you, great fans who's made AEW Dynamite Winter is Coming a huge success for AEW and TNT. We got our best demo rating of 2020 and a new AEW champion in Kenny Omega and an indelible memory with Sting's arrival and won the night." Now, obviously, I know people sometimes, they don't really like talking about ratings, and to be honest, I think the whole waiting for the ratings to come out on Thursday or Friday or whenever it happens when it comes to AEW and NXT, at this point it's a bit overhyped. I've said before that it's the same thing every week. AEW wins every single week. That is just going to be the case forever at this point. It is going to be the case. Yes, some weeks NXT might draw more viewers, whether it's a couple of thousand people or whatever, but when it comes to things that truly matter, and I don't want to sound like Chris Jericho, and I don't want to sound like Tony Khan, but when it comes to the things that do truly matter, like that key 18 to 49 demographic, AEW Dynamite wins every single week. And people will say, well, that doesn't really matter. It does. It does really matter. If you look at the cable 150, AEW Dynamite most of the time is right up there, close to the top. I think this week they were 7th or something like that. Some weeks they're 3rd, 2nd. I don't think they've ever been 1st or anything like that. The point being, that key demographic, that's why they're ranked like that, because that's what matters. That is genuinely what matters when it comes to ratings. It's what matters to the cable networks, and it's what matters to the advertisers, and that's all they care about. And this week's ratings, to be honest, the only interesting thing was going to be how many people tuned in for the special Winter is Coming event. Now, obviously, what was the rating? 913,000 viewers. That was all about Kenny Omega and Jon Moxley because that was the match that was advertised. So that's what people tuned in live to see. The interesting rating will, of course, be next week, because next week we have the fallout from so much when it comes to AEW. We have the fallout from having a new champion, from having the relationship, the new working relationship with Impact Wrestling. Of course, AEW airs on Wednesday, Impact airs on Tuesday, so we're going to have the fallout from the new world champion Kenny Omega and the fallout from Impact on Tuesday, plus we actually know that Sting's going to be there on Wednesday. He's going to speak in AEW for the first time. That's been announced and advertised. So what will be interesting to see is if AEW can top that 913,000 next week. And of course, that's only live viewership. So when it comes to DVR, with DVR viewership, I think AEW regularly tops 1 million viewers, probably close to 2 million actually, and NXT probably tops 1 million as well, because the people that are watching AEW live probably, in most cases, not all the time, but in most cases, DVR NXT as well. So it's a bit of a non-story, but it's interesting to see how many people tuned in live to watch AEW Dynamite, specifically when it comes to special events. But what is interesting when it comes to Tony Khan's tweet is that he did get a response from a WWE superstar, that being T-Bar on Monday Night Raw. T-Bar responded to Tony Khan. Of course, T-Bar, formerly known as Dominik Dijakovic in NXT, he's now a member of the Raw roster, known as T-Bar, part of the faction known as Retribution. He's actually become very, very popular over the last few months due to his social media presence. Nothing's off limits when it comes to T-Bar and most of Retribution, but especially T-Bar. He's kind of broken that fourth wall in pro wrestling and kind of steps over those lines that you're maybe not supposed to do when it comes to being a WWE superstar, talking about AEW and talking about things that aren't really supposed to be talking about, like directly addressing criticism or directly replying and responding to critics online. His Twitter Twitter game's pretty damn strong. So Thursday, last night, T-Bar struck again. He responded to that tweet from the AEW president, Tony Khan. As Tony Khan, and I just mentioned he spoke about the viewing figures for Dynamite and NXT with the Winter is Coming event and the NXT TakeOver War Games Go Home show. In response to the tweet, T-Bar simply wrote, T-Bar 1.74 million, pointing to the fact that his show, Monday Night Raw, garnered nearly double the viewership of Dynamite. Now, of course, this week's post-Survivor Series episode of Raw averaged 1.741 million on the USA Network, which is actually down slightly. It was down 3.7% from last week's 1.808 million viewers. As of recording right now, Tony Khan hasn't responded. To be honest, it's just another case of T-Bar continuing his strong Twitter game. I think, to be honest, if I'm going to be really brutally honest here, when I saw this, you know, when T-Bar started responding to people, he actually responded to one of my tweets a couple of months ago. When he started to respond to people, addressing critics, which a lot of WWE superstars don't actually do, he kind of made fun of it. He was even DMing people. He was being very open and actually helped Retribution kind of get over to a point. I know Retribution, to be honest, it's a dead faction. It's a dead angle. WWE was behind it to a point, but the bizarre booking, the bizarre names, the bizarre masks, the real illogical losses, losing all the time, whatever, the gimmick is done. It's done. It had a chance to succeed, but from the start it was booked just bizarrely and just hasn't worked. When Retribution, the members were actually revealed and they got their separate Twitter accounts and you had people like T-Bar actually addressing people, it kind of won some fans over. A lot of people were saying, you know what, the booking on TV isn't great, the faction, the angle, the storyline isn't great, but the Twitter game of some of these members of Retribution is actually really strong and highly entertaining. A lot of people were saying, get this version of Retribution on TV. But when I saw him respond to Tony Khan last night, it's funny. But I think everyone kind of went, okay, you're bragging about the Monday Night Raw 1.74 million. That's great. But if you look at the Raw ratings over the course of like the last, well, however many years, especially the last year or so, they are in the toilet compared to what they used to be back in the day. So I don't know if it's about bragging that much. Raw does, when it comes to the demo, I mean, I've got to be fair here. Raw, when it comes to the demo on Monday, does pretty well. It's usually ranked in the top at least 10 of the Raw, the cable 150. Sometimes it's top, and sometimes it isn't, especially over the last few months with the election and all that kind of stuff. It hasn't. Cable news has just been off the charts, but it does well in those demographics, so you have to be fair. Nevertheless, I don't know if it's something worth bragging about. That show sometimes, Monday nights, is unwatchable, and especially when it's 3 hours in length, though it kind of comes off as a little bit, well, I'm not sure what you're really bragging about there. Nevertheless, it's T-Bar's strong Twitter game continuing, and look, it's better than what Retribution's actually doing on Monday Night Raw, so you can't really criticise it that much, I suppose. Another thing I wanted to talk about was Billie Kay and a possible new role for Billie Kay on Friday Night SmackDown. Now, we've seen in recent weeks, Billie Kay's gimmick since she was drafted to SmackDown is essentially going up to everyone, showing them her resume and trying to pitching herself for different jobs. Well, one of those jobs could be an assistant to WWE official Adam Pearce, because he's teased the possibility of this on his social media account. Now, last week on Friday Night SmackDown, Billie Kay continued to circulate her headshots and resume and even offered to take over commentary duties on behalf of Michael Cole and Corey Graves. Her resume was also uploaded on Twitter. Now, in his tweet, which included a picture of Kay sharing her resume with Adam Pearce, he suggested, quote, "It's been suggested that perhaps I could use an assistant. You guys know anyone looking for a gig?" Now, Corey Graves, SmackDown announcer, responded to the tweet and said he was open for the job position, but it looks like potentially Billie Kay could be an on-screen assistant, as it were, to Adam Pearce on SmackDown. Now, Billie Kay, of course, she's former Women's Tag Team Champion. She hasn't competed on WWE TV since the Survivor Series triple threat qualifying match against Natalya and Bianca Belair, which she of course lost. But I will say, this is actually a gimmick that's starting to get over. When it comes to Billie Kay and Peyton Royce of the Iconics, I mean, the decision to split them up is still baffling at this point. I think people at the time, possibly, they were willing to give WWE and Vince McMahon the benefit of the doubt because we'd seen those reports and rumours. Vince McMahon's super high on Peyton Royce. Peyton Royce is going to get a push on Raw. And everyone went, oh, well, okay. We don't want to see the Iconics split up. They are a legitimate tag team. You've got Women's Tag Team Championships. They're highly entertaining, but if you're going to push Peyton Royce to the moon, okay, we'll go with that. But they haven't. That's the most frustrating thing. They've done nothing with Peyton Royce apart from put her in another tag team with someone she has less chemistry with and doesn't want to be with, that being Lacey Evans. Why would you split up the Iconics? Legitimately a tag team, legitimately best friends since they were this big. And why would you pair Peyton Royce in a new tag team that doesn't make any sense, that doesn't have any chemistry, and is going nowhere in terms of a storyline on Raw? It's baffling. It's absolutely baffling. And at this point, you talk about all those reports of Vince McMahon super high on Peyton Royce. Billie Kay's the one actually being featured on SmackDown because she's got a gimmick that's getting over with the headshots and the resume. I think both of them highly entertaining. So I'm all for Billie Kay getting more TV time. I'm all for new characters getting pushed and promoted on TV. And I think she'd do great in the assistant role to Adam Pearce. If it brings back the role of general managers, I'm actually for that. At the time, when it came to general managers in WWE for Raw and SmackDown, at the time, the gimmick was outplayed, and I totally agreed with WWE's position to remove them. But for me, it was always a case of removing them to eventually bring them back, because it was an outdated gimmick. It was just something that needed to be rested. I think Adam Pearce does a fantastic job as the head official in WWE. I think, to be honest, if they're not going to go with general managers, just give Adam Pearce a proper title as WWE Commissioner. Bring the Commissioner role back, or not the President. I can't imagine Vince McMahon would be wanting to give someone the President title. He's that much of an egomaniac, quite frankly. Nevertheless, maybe give Adam Pearce the Commissioner job, and then you can have Billie Kay as the assistant. Maybe she can then appear on Raw and SmackDown. Or maybe Adam Pearce has assistants on Raw and SmackDown. I don't know. There is something there to do, though. And if it involves Billie Kay, then I'm all for it. I'm excited to see her flourish in this new role if it happens. Now, what I also want to talk about as well, NXT TakeOver War Games is this Sunday. And Triple H has been doing a lot of media to hype that, and has given an update on former NXT champion Karrion Kross, specifically his recovery from his shoulder injury, which forced him to, of course, vacate the NXT championship. Now, this was in an interview with Ryan Satin of Fox Sports, in which he spoke with the NXT founder, executive producer, whatever his actual title is. I'm not sure what his title currently is, Triple H. It's super, super long. Anyway, during the interview, Triple H was asked about the status of Karrion Kross. And as noted last month on the Wrestling Observer Radio, it reported that Karrion Kross was on his way back to the ring. Not really news, because of course he is. He's not going to retire. But he's on his way back, and Triple H has confirmed this. Triple H said, to quote him, TikTok any second. Now, of course, as I mentioned, Karrion Kross has been out of action since suffering a separated shoulder during his NXT Championship win over Keith Lee at NXT TakeOver 30 during SummerSlam weekend. Of course, he then had to relinquish the NXT Championship in the following episode of NXT, which was on August 26th. What is super interesting at this point is that, of course, the NXT Championship for that period of time over the summer was just absolutely cursed. Because you had Karrion Kross win it, he separated his shoulder in the match, he has to relinquish the championship. Finn Balor eventually wins the NXT Championship in a bizarre twist of fate, kind of parallels when he relinquished the Universal Championship in 2016, so it kind of felt like at the time life was balancing each other out. But then, of course, Finn Balor gets injured at NXT TakeOver 31 against Kyle O'Reilly, broken jaw. We hear those reports at the time going, it might not be that serious. They're thinking he could have, work through it, or he might be out only a couple of weeks. At this point, it's December. NXT TakeOver 31, when was that? September? Or the end of September, around that period of time? Finn Balor still hasn't competed, and he still does not look ready at all. When he appeared on NXT a couple of weeks ago and introduced the Undisputed Era, he didn't have any physicality. He hasn't touched anyone since. I don't know a timetable for him to return. I'm not saying he should vacate the NXT Championship, but we're getting to a point where the entirety of Finn Balor's championship reign, he would have competed maybe only a couple of times, and Karrion Kross might be back, and Finn Balor still might not be cleared to compete. There isn't an NXT Championship match on Sunday at TakeOver, so obviously Finn Balor still isn't ready. It's a really confusing time, and potentially, if Triple H is saying TikTok any second, separated shoulder, suffered in August, they reckon 3-4 months he could be out. Shoulder injuries are crazy. I mean, he could be out for a couple of months, he could be out for a year. The way that it looks on social media, you've seen all these videos of Karrion Kross training, hitting punching bags and all that kind of stuff. He looks ready to me, so I would suggest his return is imminent. Possibly even Sunday at TakeOver, maybe, or on the following episode of NXT. If he is back, it does raise the question, what's going to be the situation with Finn Balor? What's the situation going to be for the NXT Championship? Irrespective of that, it's great just to see Karrion Kross on his way back. He is a massive superstar. He is a massive superstar with a ton of potential. Even from his days in Impact and Lucha Underground and all that kind of stuff, he has a ton of potential, and he is destined to do great things in NXT and beyond. I have no doubt about that. Vince McMahon, you can tell, will take one look at Karrion Kross and go, that guy is money. He's one of a few names that I think can succeed in both NXT and in WWE on Raw and SmackDown. He has been booked as a monster in NXT as well. He won the NXT Championship after only competing in something like 5 or 6 or 7 matches. One of the biggest pushes and stories in NXT history was his monumental rise to the NXT Championship. I think it rivals Kevin Owens in how quickly he became the NXT Champion, and it just sucked that he got injured straight away. But it'll be great to see him back. I'm excited to see him back whenever he does come back, but it looks like his return could be imminent. Now, keeping on the topic of NXT, Triple H, as I mentioned, was doing all of these interviews, and he spoke about NXT and why they weren't at Survivor Series, and it kind of confirmed something that I'd been talking about previously when we spoke about NXT and spoke about Survivor Series. Essentially, Triple H revealed the reason as to why NXT was not featured on the Survivor Series pay-per-view like it was in 2019. Triple H admitted that he's not involved with every aspect of the decision, but he did confirm that the current pandemic was the main factor in keeping NXT off of Survivor Series this year. He said, quote, "To be honest, I'm not in every aspect of creative decisions, but I also believe from the creative teams, as they're trying to build individual talents, they're not combining things too much. I also believe the pandemic and situation took a role in that. We tried to keep the things somewhat separated between brands, between Performance Center, between things, just to limit that exposure." Now, he's being very cautious with, of course, what he says there, but it kind of confirms what everyone had speculated, in the sense that the difference between the Performance Center and the superstars in the Thunderdome now on Raw and SmackDown at the Amway Center, soon to be Tropicana Field, the biggest difference there is testing, essentially. When it comes to Raw and SmackDown, the talents are tested the day before the tapings. If they return a negative result, they're then given the stuff for TV, they're then given the stuff for whatever they're going to be doing the following day. If they have a positive test result, they aren't allowed anywhere near the Amway Center. They're certainly not allowed inside of the Amway Center. So that's how strong the testing policy is when it comes to the Thunderdome, as it should be, by the way. They know the day before exactly what's going on when it comes to testing, etc. Where it comes to the Performance Center, they're not tested every day. I think they're tested once, twice, maybe 3 times a week at most, and that's why we've seen these huge outbreaks several times. I think 3 or 4 times over the last couple of months we have seen these outbreaks at the Performance Center, because they don't test every day, and there are more people there that come from all different aspects of life. There are some people, by all accounts, at the Performance Center that aren't totally on board with the whole pandemic issue, which is nuts. Nevertheless, whatever, but they're you know, when it comes to mask wearing and all that kind of stuff, basically the testing and all that kind of stuff is a lot more laxed at the Performance Center than it is in the Amway Center. Therefore, to me, it always made a ton of sense to keep NXT off of Survivor Series, because you can't have people that are only being tested a couple of times coming in and mixing with all these people on Raw and SmackDown. And the lifeblood, essentially, of WWE is Raw and SmackDown at the moment. Therefore, it makes the most sense, to be honest, it makes the most sense to keep those things separate. And that's exactly what WWE did. They didn't want to risk any infection. They didn't want to risk any outbreaks, because if you have major outbreaks and you've got major superstars off of TV quarantining for 2 weeks or maybe even longer, possibly even getting sick, they just can't afford to do that at the moment. They just can't afford to have these superstars off of TV, especially when you've got the likes of Roman Reigns and Sami Zayn that decided to sit out huge portions of the year because of the pandemic, because they didn't feel safe or they didn't feel comfortable performing, while the rules in WWE when it comes to social distancing, mask wearing, hand sanitizing, testing weren't as strong as they could be. It would make no sense to jeopardize that and bring in these people from NXT that aren't being tested all the time and haven't been adhering to some of the mask wearing policies and the social distancing, etc. It just doesn't make sense. So Triple H essentially confirmed that. That made sense to me. It sucked that he didn't have NXT involved. Everyone wanted NXT to be involved in Survivor Series this year. It's what made Survivor Series very strong last year, was the involvement of NXT and actually having a feeling of superstars wanting to defend their brand, actually having a feeling of brand loyalty, wanting to prove that NXT was a superior brand. Brand supremacy was a legitimate concept last year, and this year it kind of just felt like an overhyped bragging rights, to be honest. But Triple H essentially confirming what everyone basically thought. It wasn't anything political. It wasn't anything that Vince McMahon hates NXT. I think in reality it was more of a safety concern, which you have to credit WWE for that. It does make the most sense. Now, continuing to talk about Triple H and his interviews he's been doing, he's talked about WWE working with other promotions. I love this story. I love this story because, of course, the big story this week is AEW's now working relationship with Impact Wrestling. This Tuesday, Kenny Omega, the new AEW World Champion, is going to be on Impact Wrestling, and AEW has a lot of relationships with other promotions right now, whether it's Impact Wrestling, whether it's AAA. They kind of have a relationship with New Japan in terms of AEW talent working with New Japan. They, of course, have a relationship with the NWA as well. So AEW is forming all of these relationships with these other companies and actually getting positive results because of this. So naturally, Triple H was asked the question during a media call hyping up Sunday's NXT TakeOver War Games event. He was asked, could WWE possibly do the same, and could possibly WWE work with other promotions in the past? Now, the caller brought up WWE's working relationships with promotions like Progress Wrestling, ICW, in the past Evolve, without actually naming AEW and Impact Wrestling because he doesn't want to PO Triple H on the media call. But this is what Triple H had to say. It's kind of a lot, so I'll try and do my best to shorten this down. He said, quote, you know, in what you've seen in the past, Progress, ICW, Evolve, all those things, yeah, we're open for business in a lot of ways. And a lot of things and a lot of everything. People's thoughts, misperceptions, their perceived knowledge of what we do, how we think, and all that stuff is often greatly misinterpreted and not necessarily accurate. So, okay, are we open to the right business opportunities? Yeah, at any given time, we're open to things. It just depends on what they are and if they're beneficial to us long term. And again, when I say long term, I'm not talking about 3 months or 6 months. Long term, 10 years, 10 years, 15 years from now, is that beneficial? Is that meaningful? Is that long term? That's how we think. It's much longer in duration, not necessarily worried about the minute by minutes. It's a long duration. And so open for business, I think you hear Vince say that a lot. I've been around him a lot to know that if it's the right thing and it's meaningful to business, he's open to everything and anything. To be honest, when I saw this story, I rolled my eyes because I understand that they had relationships in the past. ICW, Progress, they're all on the WWE network right now. But WWE bought Evolve in the end, actually, and they actually just put all their stuff on the network and they bought all of their talent. So you got Gabe Sapolsky working for NXT, all that kind of stuff. The idea that WWE would actually be willing to work with other bigger promotions like Impact, like New Japan, like the NWA is ludicrous. It is ludicrous. They wouldn't. Triple H might want to make connections with other promotions. Vince McMahon doesn't. Vince McMahon hates working with other promotions. Vince McMahon hates talent trading. He's always hated stuff like that. Remember in 97 when the NWA World Tag Team Championships and the North American Championship came onto Raw? Vince McMahon hated that. And Vince McMahon hates anything else in WWE. Vince McMahon doesn't know anything else apart from WWE exists. You hear this all the time with outside people when they come into the company. That they say legitimately, Vince McMahon has no idea who they are because he's never seen any product apart from WWE. That is the case. So this idea that WWE, we're open for business, we're willing to work with other promotions, it just isn't true. It just isn't true. WWE really doesn't care about other promotions apart from squishing them. That's why NXT is on Wednesdays. It's on Wednesday nights on USA to draw viewers away from AEW. That has always been the case. And even though NXT would be better off on a Tuesday away from AEW, and AEW would be better off without NXT on a Wednesday, WWE doesn't care about that. They don't care about working for other promotions or helping other promotions or making connections with other promotions unless it's really small promotions and essentially they get all of their talent, they get all of their content, and eventually they will buy them out like Evolve. That is how it works. That is how it works. For years, we've heard that report of the tier system, right? Do you remember the tier system on the network? There was going to be certain tiers, and in specific tiers, you were going to get independent wrestling on there. And you kind of have independent wrestling shows on there now, whether it is Progress or whether it is Evolve, whether it is ICW, that is actually on the WWE network right now. That is the case. That is the case of being on the network, but it's only small independent shows, and that is to appease a small niche of the fan base out there. WWE really doesn't care about making those connections with other promotions, and they won't. They just won't. That just isn't going to happen. I remember hearing a report, it might have been even Jim Cornette said this, so take this with a pinch of salt, that initially when NWA were launching the NWA Power Series, which was on YouTube for a while, they've got a new series now, NWA Shockwave, when they were making that NWA Power Series, initially there were discussions or even negotiations about airing it on the WWE Network. And of course that never happened. Why? Because WWE probably wanted the majority of the profits from all of that. And that's not to say that's not in their rights. It's their network and it's their platform. It's their audience. Nevertheless, Triple H is kind of telling the truth of what he says there. They do want to have connections with promotions as long as it benefits WWE. They don't care about what goes on the other side of it. They never have. Even when it was with things with Smoky Mountain Wrestling, OVW, listen to some of the interviews about people that ran OVW and those other companies about how WWE, when it comes to having an affiliation, a connection, a partnership with them, WWE will take everything from them. You might get one appearance from a WWE superstar at some point, but in 2020, will that happen? I just can't see it. I just can't see it. No, it's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. But I thought it was interesting that someone brought that up, considering the week that we have seen when it comes to partnerships with Impact and AEW. Nevertheless, WWE making a major relationship like that in the future, not going to happen. And they don't need to, quite frankly. They're a $1 billion publicly traded company. They don't need to. But this idea of, we're open for business. If it works for us, do me a favour. Do me a favour. Another story I want to talk about, Dana Brooke. Dana Brooke has revealed she got a black eye from Monday Night Raw. She's taken to Twitter to show off the black eye she received against Retribution's Reckoning, Mia Yim, on this week's Monday Night Raw. The Retribution members' WWE in-ring debut caused a lot of discussion on social media and online, especially after she lost her mask. Dana Brooke picked up the victory, of course, with a roll-up in the match, prompting Retribution leader Mustafa Ali to make it clear to Reckoning that she let the faction down, she let Retribution down. But Dana Brooke then actually released this picture on social media saying, quote, keep taking cheap shots, Mia Yim, and play dirty with your Retribution clique. I can play dirty too. Leave Ali out of it. I'll slap him around again. Hashtag WWE at WWE. Hashtag Raw. It looks pretty nasty as well. Pretty nasty. I guess what they say is it ain't ballet, of course, in the ring, but a pretty nasty shiner nevertheless. When it comes to Reckoning, and it comes to the whole Retribution thing, we talked about the Retribution storyline earlier on in the video. The storyline could have worked. The angle could have worked. The faction could have worked. To me, it's jumped the shark now. It missed its opportunity to succeed. I, like most people, hate the whole masks deal. I hate that we have to believe that, Reckoning isn't Mia Yim. I hate having to believe that T-Bar isn't Dominik Dijakovic and all that kind of stuff. Slapjack is the most ridiculous name in the world still. The only guy I think that looks good in the mask is Dio Maddin as Mace. He looks a bit like Predator. Apart from that, it's a stupid storyline. It's a stupid storyline. I'm all for Mia Yim being featured on Monday Night Raw. There's a real lack of... I was going to say there's a lack of depth, actually, in the women's division on Raw, but there isn't. There's a lack of promotion of the women's division on Raw. That's the issue. You've got Asuka, who's the Raw Women's Champion, and she's got no opponents, but she does. She has all of these opponents on the women's roster. They're just not being used against her for whatever reason. It's absolutely baffling. And finally, the last thing I wanted to talk about was Drew McIntyre's entrance. Now, it's been a new addition to Drew McIntyre on Monday Night Raw. Of course, Drew McIntyre, his entrance has evolved over time, certainly, hasn't it? Whether it's the noise of the sword, and now he actually has the sword he comes out with, and he comes out in the kill, he puts the sword into the stage, fire comes up, pyro comes up. Now, Drew McIntyre, the current WWE Champion, of course, we know that WWE Chairman Vince McMahon is a huge fan of Drew McIntyre, and according to a recent report from PW Insider, Vince McMahon is being incredibly hands-on when it comes to Drew McIntyre, specifically his new entrance with his sword, his look, his pyro. The report from PW Insider says Vince McMahon wants everything timed along with the pyro, and he has spent time explaining exactly how he wants Drew McIntyre to handle the sword during his entrance. I mean, micromanaging comes to mind there. Oh my, it's ridiculous. So everything happens just the way he wants. So this confirms other reports that Vince McMahon is, hands-on when it comes to everything at the moment. But in a recent interview with Ryan Satin of Fox Sports, Drew McIntyre revealed that the sword he uses in his entrance is actually owned by Vince McMahon himself. Maybe that's why he's so protective over the entrance, because it's Vince McMahon's sword. Vince McMahon owning a sword and bringing it to TV does not shock me. I can't believe they haven't got a prop sword or just made a sword or anything like that. Vince McMahon, the fact that they went... I can just imagine him sitting at home, like in his office like this, and sort of looking around and going, sword. let's use that on Raw. Like, it's the fact that he is in his 70s is crazy. I mean, he had his eyebrows painted on and all that kind of weird stuff at Survivor Series, and he carries a sword around is the least weird thing about him at the moment. It's absolutely insane. In storyline, of course, the sword was presented to Drew McIntyre as a gift by Sheamus, and McIntyre said that Vince McMahon received the sword as a gift from Triple H and Stephanie McMahon, and therefore it's found its way on WWE TV. McIntyre added that the idea of him having a sword in his entrance was actually Vince McMahon's, and the WWE CEO offered to let him use the sword. He said, quote, "Until recently, we had a conversation about it, and once the boss has something in his head, like as I was thinking about walking with a kilt, obviously he likes to take it a little bit further, and suddenly we had the sword, then we had the pyro, and he was very hands-on with this, and I guess I let the cat out of the bag. The sword that I had is actually Vince's sword. It was gifted to him by Stephanie and Hunter. That I did not know. I believe the conversation went, we need a sword. We don't have a sword, sir. I have a sword." And I heard that story and told him, of course you have a sword. It literally was my reaction a second ago. Of course Vince McMahon has a sword. It's crazy. In fairness to Vince McMahon, in fairness to Drew McIntyre, I like the new entrance. I wasn't massive on the whole sword sound that was added to the start of his entrance. I still didn't really like that. It's just, everything has to have an entrance. Braun Strowman has to be a train. He was the Strowman Express, remember that? And he still has the train. He is the glorified 2020 A-Train, the B-Train. It's even worse than the A-Train, the B-Train. Nevertheless, I like Drew McIntyre's new entrance. I like the promo. I like all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's the glitz. It's the sizzle of pro wrestling, isn't it? So I don't have a problem with that. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on these WWE news stories today? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, chatting about WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply. If you like any of these news stories, if you've enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button. It really does help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to WrestleNews 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now. Or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. And I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.